All right, I've picked out where the hecklers are. There's two over here. We've got Provo sitting back there, a ward member back there that I know, so I can't say damn. And so it should be fun. All right. There are sign-up sheets that are going to be going around. So sign up for your CUs. If you're from out of state and need CUs, there's a form up here that you can get. Okay? Before we start, how many of you have ever have a drone now? Anybody have a drone? Okay. How many of you want to get one? Okay. All right. And how many of you just want it for like coyote hunting? Okay. Every time we go on a construction site, if we go on a construction site, the contractors they go buy one like the next day, and it's kind of like they don't know how to fly it or anything, and then they're like, we're just going coyote hunting. So it's kind of a crazy world. So I'm going to talk about, we've been doing this for probably about a year. We bought one last summer. I saw somebody flying one, and I talked my boss into buying one. So I'm going to talk about the rules, what you need to know, how we've crashed it, all these different things. I'm going to show you today, I don't advocate that you buy a certain brand or anything. We just bought this because it was pre-set up. It's not a kit. You didn't have to do anything. It pretty much flies out of the box. There's some firmware upgrades you need to do. I noticed on this one, I've only had it about a week. I noticed I hit a wasp at about 20 miles per hour, and it made a splat. So this is a DJI. So this is a company out of China. They went from, I think it said they went from like 20 employees to 2,500 in the last 5 years. They're worth 15 billion, I guess. And so they've sold a lot. Most of the ones you see are like this. This is the newer version. We've been flying the Phantom 2. This is the Phantom 3. The real cool thing about the Phantom 3 is it gets Russian satellites, and so it's probably a little less prone to flyaways. And so we'll show you about this. So this is what the drone looks like. Here's the camera on it. This weighs about 3 pounds. And this one you could actually fly indoors, but I haven't tried it yet, and I'm not going to try it with everyone here. That's the controller to it. We bought a little tablet. It runs off an app off your phone, so real time you'll see what's going on in the camera, and we'll go through that. And then this is the battery. The battery probably weighs the most of anything, and we usually buy 2 or 3 of these because they only last about 20 minutes. Okay. This one, interesting on this one, the camera's a 4K camera, so the video files are like 3 or 4 times bigger than even HD files. So we went out and I think we shot 15 minutes of video last week, and it was like 10 gig. And so the other thing we haven't figured out yet, we haven't figured out a software to even process it in 4K. So I ran them just back to HD, but we decided to get something like that, and I don't know, 3 years from now, I guess 4K TVs will be really cheap and cool. But now you can't even watch anything. So let's see here. Do you want to turn that light off? Thank you. Okay, that all right? Can you still see me? Do I look sexy in my Britney Spears headphone? Okay. And I forget that I'm being recorded, so can you edit some of these things later? Okay. All right. This is like when I went to BYU. I spoke at BYU, and I've never been invited back. Okay. All right, here we go. Oh, all right, applause, please. Okay. Yeah. People are going to think, what is this class about? Okay. So this is your first day buying a drone and you don't read the instructions like men, okay? And what happens is if you run it it'll tell you the battery's running out at about 30%. In fact, it'll tell you that there's a point where it just says, I'm going to just land. So wherever it's at, it'll just land. And you probably don't want to be over water. It's not waterproof. So this is one of the first videos we did. You may notice that there's a lot of precast products in here. We were just there hapstancely. We were hobbyists. This wasn't for a commercial use. But anyway, this is a project, and this was like the first, probably the first week we had this. I had to set up the firmware on the computer, update a few things, and you go out and fly it. It's pretty easy. We tested it out at a park and some things before this. This is running at probably twice speed. As you may notice, Oldcastle does precast products. That's just a plug. So what happened, just to tell you that first day, my boss isn't here, so this is really cool. I get to tell him about the Oldcastle logos in the Carlos Braceras video earlier this week and how big they were, and it wasn't even our product. But so we made it, we just didn't sell it. So anyway, my boss, he was out flying this day. He went down by the Ogden River. He was down trying to get a video of the outlet of this culvert, and the drone started acting a little weird. And so he shot it up to about 100 feet, and he said it stabilized and it was great, and then it just turned to the side and took off at like 30 miles per hour down the Ogden River. And they found it later. It had hit a tree. We weren't able to get the rest of the footage. We were able to go back and recover this footage, but it got rid of the last 7 seconds, which I was so disappointed. But anyway, it sheared the camera off. A new camera was like $700. And so I still have that drone. It still flies. It just doesn't have a camera. So that was our first crash that day. And that was about a week into it. And my boss calls me, and he's like, we had a problem. And so it was kind of like, it was cool. He approves my credit card, so I don't care. So this is what the older one looked like. It was basically about the exact same. We'll show you some things on here. So those are my hands, in case you didn't notice. And I had a tan last summer. And so anyway, that's the battery going in. The batteries are smart batteries, so if you click on it, in fact, if you click on this one, it'll show you that it's full. So it'll tell you by bars. You plug it in. This takes maybe an hour to charge. You can get a car charger or different things. So it will actually tell you on the app on your phone how much battery you got left. So you can tell all the time what's going on with that. Just to give you an idea on the specs, this weighs about 3 pounds. The batteries, they're, what are they? Lithium? I don't remember. Somebody told me. Anyway, they're good batteries. So they've got a lot of juice in there. The accuracy, so the GPS accuracy on it, vertical, it's going to be within 2.5 feet. So you'll see it sometimes. That's kind of annoying, isn't it? The moderator would tell you to turn your cell phones down. Okay. Yeah, if you guys see him that know him, don't tell him what I said. Okay. So vertically, when you get up there, it may change a little bit in elevation. Okay. Horizontally, 8 foot in accuracy. So when we've there was a way to do autopilot, have it take off, go fly to certain places, come back and land. It would be within about 15 feet of where it took off. So fairly accurate that way. It'll go up about 20 feet a second. It's supposed to come down about 6 feet a second, and it's supposed to run at about 33 miles per hour max. If we have like a 20 mile per hour wind, we'd probably decide not to fly it. When my boss has flown it up by like Powder Mountain, as he'd come over the ridge and the wind would hit it, he's like, it's all I could do to get it to come back. So if you've got more wind than you've got speed, then it may drift on you. Okay. The camera on it's 14 megapixels. The video resolution on that one was 1080p. Now the new one's 4K actually. The old one had a fisheye lens, so if you look at stuff on it, and as you watch this, the world looks distorted. You'll see like the curve of the earth from up above. The new one, actually, they went back and put a straight lens on it, so there's not as much distortion because people complained. But it has a real wide-angle view. You can't zoom on it. You got to get in. You got to get the drone in close to where you're at. This one had a 5.8 gigahertz controller. The new one, I think, is the 2.4. I don't know why they changed it. On the old one, you have Wi-Fi, so you had a Wi-Fi link from your phone to the drone, and you could get out 1,500 feet away. On the new one, you can fly it like a mile away. It has a light bridge link to it, so it's a little bit different, but that's a little bit problematic, and we'll tell you why. There's no fly zones, so you're limited within 5 miles of an airport. There's other things like DC, all of DC is a no-flight zone. New York's like a no-fly zone. There's certain places. Okay, so when we got it, you have to plug it in. You can plug it into your computer and you update the firmware. They're always bringing out firmware updates. And just like any other computers, maybe it works, maybe it doesn't. Maybe it causes you more problems than it doesn't. This is how, what you have to do is you have to calibrate the compass. Wherever you're at, you, when you start, you have to turn it 360 degrees with it sitting horizontal, and you have to turn 360 degrees with it sitting pointed down vertical. And then it'll tell you that the compass is calibrated. That's really important. Here, I'll just show you this. YouTube has a lot of interesting videos of people. This guy's kind of my hero. I think he's pretty cool. Anyway, people like this go out and fly it in like really bad winds or whatever. I don't know. So anyway, calibrating the compass. Any of you guys like kind of electrically oriented or know electrical engineers? Anybody like that in here? No? Okay, didn't think so. Anybody, who designs signals in here? Okay, so magnetic stuff, is that an issue? Like, you used to use loops and cars going over them would induce the controller, right? Well, this, when you calibrate it, it tells you, if you start looking at things, it tells you, well, maybe you shouldn't calibrate it. The last thing I heard was don't put it on the back of your pickup because of the mass of metal, that it'll actually, the compass won't calibrate exactly right. And so just to tell you a story, so I was getting ready to do a presentation. I'd flown it a bunch of times. And I was going out to fly over some canals, and I thought, well, you know, you take it out and you like to have something to set it on, not in the dirt. So I got out of my car and I was like, oh, I don't even need to take the case. I'll just run over there. There's a power transformer over there. And why do you guys laugh? And so it was like 14 kV, something like that, you know. So I started doing the calibration on top of that. And I got a kind of a bad air. And so I was like, oh, shoot, I won't tell you what I said. But anyway, I'm like, oh, I just had heard about this. So I took it over like 25, 30 feet away, got away from there, recalibrated it. And as I took it up, it just started taking off sideways. So I just turned it off, got it down close to the ground and turned it off and crashed it before it like hit a tree or anything else. And it kind of pulled one of the legs out and did some damage. But so things you ought to, there's a lot of things you ought to know that we've kind of learned from by flying them. This is what the app looks like on the old one. The new app is actually a little bit different, but this is off a phone. So what you can see up here is, this is what would move the camera up and down. This would give you where you were in relationship to yourself. So as the drone gets out there, you can see which direction it's flying and how far it is. You can take video, you can take photos. You have the Wi-Fi extender had a % battery.
Can we ask everyone to please slide over and let these people come in from the door? It's actually a fire hazard to block the door. If we get people either to move one way or the other and let these people.
She should have probably just asked the people that were bored to leave and then It would have taken care of it. Okay, so, all right. Now you just invited like 30 more people in that are going to be bored. I'm sorry. Okay, so anyway, you have how much the Wi-Fi extender was charged, so the controller itself needs to be charged. This was how many satellites you have. Satellites are the key issue. If you have at least 6 satellites, you're good to fly. We've been flying it before, and for whatever reason, it starts blinking at you, and you look, and you've only got 5 satellites. And when you've only got 5 satellites, it starts to just drift with the wind. The satellites keep it stable. So you bring it up, you let go of it, you don't have to do anything, it just hovers. Okay, so that's the really cool part about it that makes it really easy. It's easy for anyone to fly unless it starts taking off. Okay? This is, we'll just go a little further. In the old app, you could actually go into Google Maps and touch waypoints and tell it to go fly to those waypoints, and it would do exactly what you told it to. It was pretty good. In the new app, I think they've actually done away with that. I think based on what I'm going to talk about with FAA. Oh, so they updated it again? They were making it so you had to fly to that, and then it would record where you flew to so that you could go refly it. So that's good, because that's pretty cool. And it's something that really helped when we did the surveying, and we'll show you. There's other things that happen that you want to be aware of. Pretty much if you go up and you're up where you got hawks or anything around there, they're going to go buzz it and fly at it. We saw it one day, and unfortunately I didn't get any videos, but you got to be careful with wildlife, different things. Okay, so when you start it, you push both sides right and left down to a 45-degree angle. That's how you start it and stop it. And then when the motors get running, you do up with your left hand to get it going up in the air. When you get up to where you want, you can just let go, it'll just hover. That's how it should perform. The GPS will keep it there. You go front and back with your right hand, side to side with your right hand. Now the camera only points forward. So when you're trying to go around and video stuff, you have to maybe fly in circles with the camera pointing in or different things because you can't turn the camera. The camera only can be controlled up and down on this one. The more expensive model, you can actually have a second guy with a controller controlling the camera. But that more expensive model is like $3,000. This one was $1,300. There's a model, the old one like that now is about $700 or $800. But I would always get the newer one because it seems that much more reliable. To spin it around, use the left stick to spin it. So what you do is you go out to a park and you learn to do combinations of those. Now the real question is, do you watch the app and you watch the camera and what you're doing, or do you watch the drone? I learned how to fly and I'd watch the drone and then I'd kind of video. But that's hard to do videoing. My boss, he learned how to fly and he just watched the app. So he learned to watch the screen. There's only one problem there. What else you're seeing and what else you're doing. So he likes to take me as his spotter, and I really don't like to do that, okay? Because then I have to watch him get close to stuff and tell him. So now on this one, on the new one, on that one you had something on the screen. On this one they just have a knob to control the camera. So you can reach to the back of this with your finger and move the camera up and down. It will show you in GPS where you're located. So it will go right in. When we went up to a dam last weekend, and we were up in American Fork Canyon, and we actually, all you had to do before you went out there was zoom to that location in your app, and it would cache the map out of Google so you had a map when you got up there, even though we didn't have a signal up there. It had GPS, it showed right where we were. Okay, So that would be like me. All right. Here's what it looks like when you're flying. So this is what, the camera's seeing in the video you get back, and that's what your app is. You can see here, he can see the point where he's at, how far away he is, and which direction he's flying. So there's a lot of options there. The new app actually does a lot more things, and it's kind of a lot more complicated, but better. You can kind of zoom in and see there, so it tells him how long his video's been going, different things. The key to the video is the gimbal. This is the most expensive part of it. So on there, this is like a three-dimensional gimbal. So when you're flying this way, the camera turns straight and straightens out. So the camera's always moving on you and compensating. So when you see the video, it looks like this thing's hardly moving at all or anything else. And so that's really what is the beauty of it. This is where he was doing waypoints. So he zoomed out from where he was, and he told it a point he wanted it to fly to. And then you can also give that point an elevation and how fast you want it to go to that. So that works very well, and he would just have it start, go fly, and land by itself. I wouldn't recommend all of that. You can actually, at any point in the flight, you can take control back of it and fly it yourself. So if it looks, one of the problems with flying at autopilot is you look at Google, you may not see a tree or something that's in the way. So you have to think all those things through and really watch it. And when it lands, it doesn't always land as well. We actually never let it land. We catch it. So when I'm flying it, I just bring it down, grab hold of it, and then turn it off. You can turn it off with one hand if you just hold the stick down. We always catch it. It was dirty where we were at the other day, and we didn't want it to get dirty, and we didn't have anything for it to take off, so my boss made me hold it. And then he just got it going real fast, and then I let go. Anyway, it's good to have a case to put it in. You can get a case where you take the rotors off each time, or you can get a case where you just leave the rotors on. It only takes a couple minutes to put the rotors on, but I don't know. Just depends. That case ends up being pretty big and pretty heavy. Let's talk about the risks. Now, this is my boss flying. I sped this up a little bit. He's flying around a little bit in a circle so he can get that. He's watching the app, okay? So he's not watching the drone probably as much. So you got to really be aware of what's around you. It flew after that. It was fine. You probably want to check everything and recalibrate it.
There's been another security scare at the White House. A small unmanned drone flew over the grounds and then crashed. It looks like an accident, and the owner is cooperating. But as Steve Handelsman shows us, this incident is raising new fears about a new threat.
It was 3 a.m. this morning. Secret Service fanned down after the drone crashed on the White House grounds. Sasha and Malia Obama were home. President Obama and the First Lady were in India and told about the drone.
Early indications are that it does not pose any sort of ongoing threat.
Here's the drone that crashed.
Okay, does that look familiar? Did that drone look familiar? Okay, it wasn't mine. All right. A guy, he was an intelligence officer back in Washington. So 3 a.m., him and his girlfriend, he takes her out on the deck and decides to show her his drone, okay? Don't laugh. Okay. And Darren, okay. And so anyway, takes it up, and it has a flyaway. It takes off, ends up a couple miles away at the White House, okay? He did call in and own up to it. No one knows what happened to him. Probably wasn't good. Okay, but that's why the FAA and everyone's concerned and all these regulations are coming up. We'll talk about that. Here's a good one for the DOT. it goes on for 2 or 3 minutes. It's interesting. You wonder who's dumb enough to do certain things, okay? But they're also the ones that shows him later on YouTube in his car, like, I found it, and it's just like, okay. So you can find all kinds of stuff on YouTube, but it brings up concerns for permitting and all the things you got to do. So let's talk about the legal aspects. Currently, so FAA is in charge of all this. FAA didn't even issue any permits until probably about a year ago. Movie makers in the United States couldn't film with drones. If you watch like other things like Gold Rush that's done in Canada, they filmed with drones all the time. But in the United States, they couldn't do anything. They finally gave them a permit. They had to have a pilot's license and a 3-person crew to go fly the drone. So it's like, now there's like 1,800 people that have applied for permits, but it's very, kind of doesn't make sense, okay? So the Congress gave the FAA 3 years to come up with a policy. The deadline for having the new rules was September 30th of 2015. A month ago, FAA just said, we're not going to get it done. They had 4,500 comments to the initial rules, but these are a little more reasonable. So this covers stuff that's less than 55 pounds, so definitely in that. It says it's going to have to be line of sight, so you have to be able to see it. Now that's an interesting point, because when you get this thing 200 feet away and 400 feet up, you can barely see it. It's hard to see it as the spotter. So what's line of sight? This thing can go a mile away from you. Now, can you really be flying it? Or does line of sight mean that you still have, you know, a direct line to it? I don't know. There's some questions about that. We only fly up to 400 feet in elevation typically. It says daylight hours, 1 at a time, no physical or mental problems. Go ahead, fill in the blank. Okay. The operator is going to have to pass an aeronautical knowledge test, have an unmanned aircraft operator certificate, be older than 17, and report any accident that causes injury or property damage, and it's going to have to be marked like an airplane. So that's what they kind of started with. Just a few things I've heard recently. Because they're really nervous about all the drones that are going to sell this year, starting in November, if you were flying one and it wasn't registered, so everyone's going to have to register their drones, and if you were flying one and they saw you and you hadn't registered, somebody, and I don't know that it's official yet, but it's a $10,000 fine. Because you've seen where they've had people out flying around the airports. The guy that fixed our drone said he got a call from a guy the other day, and he said, my drone won't start, rotors won't spin. And he says, well, where are you? And he says, I'm at the airport. And it's like, yeah, this one actually won't even start if you're out there, and if you're within 5 miles, I think it restricts your elevation to like 100 feet or something. So it's really, there's a lot of issues and problems that way. From what I hear, in the spring they'll probably have be closer to the real rules. We've just been trying to stay away from all that. We had a contractor the other day that said, we'll pay you to go out and do this, and we're like, no, we can't. There's no commercial use on this. So right now, the way it is, and this is crazy, but if a farmer went out and wanted to fly a model airplane or this over his field and play with it and do loops and everything, it's legal. But if he wanted to look at his crops and see how his crops were doing for commercial use, that would be illegal. So we've just happened to bond some projects and we played around them, okay, to try out the drone. All right.
Telling it where I want it to go and it'll just go there. I have the ability to create a target for the camera to look at. If I fly around in a circle, it'll keep that target in the camera at all times.
The way our software works is it's using the similar techniques that humans use when they use their 2 eyes to perceive their world in 3D. But instead of using only 2 eyes or 2 cameras, we are using thousands of images captured by a drone to combine these all together to have a consistent 3D model.
Okay, so the question comes up, can you survey with this or do different things? So there's a bunch of different 3D softwares out there that you can use. We just decided to use this one. We got a free 7-day trial or something to see what we could do with it. So we went up to our concrete pipe plant up in Ogden, and we were flying around there, and we created a point cloud. This had like 6 million points in it from taking photos over our plant and triangulating those points and putting it together. You can see like the pipes here, somebody's truck. What it, excuse me, kind of like LiDAR. Kind of like LiDAR, it colors the point with whatever color was in the photo. Good thing. So that's why there's color in there, but those are actually 3D points. And I flew that the day after Christmas last year, and it took me a couple hours for the computer to process it. So we wanted to see how that would work. So I'll just wake you up for a minute. I guess it's slightly waterproof. So the app that came with this surveying software, you put that on your phone, and it would actually fly a grid at 150 foot of elevation. It would do a grid over your project. It would do about 2 acres on a battery. It flies at 2 miles per hour, and it just goes back and forth, and you pull it up on Google Maps, and you can tell it what to do. It got photos like this, so these are all the different photos. You can see that that lens was very distorted. You can see that it's a fisheye lens. So you got to take out the distortion. Well, as you go along, it shoots photos like this. Now, in the software, what it does, it actually really liked the distortion, that it could see a lot of area. If it found a point on something, it would go find that same point in 27 different photos. And you can see there, and if I zoom in on this, you can see that this point that it's identifying, it's got all these different rotated views of that. That's how it triangulates and gets back to elevations and points. Conceptually, pretty cool. Accuracy-wise, not all there yet, but we'll tell you about that. So just to give you an idea, that was our building. You can see the distortion in it. First thing you do is you build an orthomosaic photo of your site. And that's what it did. So it took all the photos and stitched them together to take out the distortion. So you can see like how the trucks are leaning over in that one, and how it's taken the photos and straightened that out. It straightened out all those edges. You can see the parking spaces are always a good thing to look at, how those don't look right. But then it takes them and so it stitched together our whole plant to give us an orthomosaic. That was pretty good. That part seems pretty accurate. It did contours based on that. Now the question is, how accurate are those? I flew another site that was by my house just over this field. This was a soccer field, and those are 1-foot contours. Well, based on 1-foot contours, I'm like, that's too much slope in a soccer field. Okay, so I called the guys, and they said, well, we'll give you another 7 days free. And I'm like, that's not really the answer to my question. And so I didn't spend much more time with it. Now, talking to the people that have done this, I've talked to different engineering firms that are already trying this. Some have said they can get to about 3/10 accuracy. I think it's there, but I think there's a lot of post-processing that has to go on. I think there's a lot of things you have to do. If you think of this field that's full of sagebrush, you're getting points on all the sagebrush that you'd have to take out. So if you zoom in, you can see the ground and you could clear the points out, but there's things you'd have to do. You couldn't fly in the winter. Okay, so there's other limitations. This was another firm, Jones and DeMille gave me this that they were working on. So they went and you can put control points in this software, and that will set up your actual elevations. They shot over this site, they created a point cloud. They modeled it. That's how it put together. It took all those different photos to put together an orthomosaic. So it's only taken a little part of each photo. It's pretty amazing that it can even do that at this point. But as they came out and compared it to their actual surveying, it had the contours running that way. The other one had the contours running that way. They seemed to be somewhat relative to each other accurate, but spun around. I don't think they shot at 150 feet the whole time, and so there's different ways of doing that. So there's a lot of things. But the one thing to consider is it's actually putting every time it takes a picture, it's coding a point in there for the 3D of where the drone was. Well, the GPS accuracy, if you remember, is only 2.5 feet vertically and 8 feet horizontally. So it really doesn't know where that drone is exactly. And so the more accurate that gets, as you look at Trimble does like a $50,000 surveying drone that's a fixed wing drone. They have like a real GPS, survey grade GPS station on the drone. Okay, so I think there's some of the things that I think within a couple of years you'll see this to start to become more accurate. Right now it could probably be used for planning level. You could at least know which way water flows, have a good, probably a more accurate than like a Google image. So you'd have some better resolution that way. We had talked to like people at the canals. They have to go out and verify their canals in the spring to know, and we sped this up to twice the speed, but you could go cover some of these things. Now, could you keep it line of sight? Could someone sit in the back of a truck and drive along the canal road and follow it? There's questions that come up about a lot of things, about what's safe, what you should do, all those things. Construction management, yeah, it was I-15. I wasn't involved, but it was in the median, and he said if it looked like it was going to go anywhere, he was just going to crash it in the median. So he kept it really low. I wasn't there that day, and I'm glad. But anyway, that's the kind of stuff. As you get out and look, you're able to see down into sites that you wouldn't be able to see and look at otherwise.
Und ganz wichtig die Tatsache, dass wir für die Überprüfungen weder das Netz abschalten, noch unsere Mitarbeiter in die Gefahrenzone schicken müssen.
So, one of the things I haven't figured out yet with this is power lines have a big magnetic field, so you'd have to have something different going on to control your drone. But as far as what they've figured out to do with it for their inspection is a huge advantage because they don't want to get up next to those power lines. And for them to be able to get in and take high-resolution photos of the equipment, I mean, they've got a special package there that they're putting together, but that would be very useful to them. So I think as time comes on, you think there's a lot of different ways of being able to get up and do inspection and different things. On the Point project, somebody said, we really need to see what our, we need to get a perspective. They were going to rent a cherry picker to go up and look at the perspective they've had from, I think it was from one of the cameras, the CCTVs, so that they knew that they could, where they could see and everything. You could use that for a lot of things. So just to go out and be able to see the construction inspection. Okay, this one takes a second, but we were way down out in Delta on a project, and so my boss was flying, and he actually would get about 1,200 feet away. I'm sorry, I wish I would have sped this up. But what he decided to do was, on his phone, you can't really see to fly very well, so he decided on his phone, and it'll show up here, and I've actually sped it up, but he decided that he would aim at the crane from 1,200 feet away. Because the crane's something you can see on all the photos. And you can see how good the video is here, that it really allows you to do some things. But here he goes, and he's 1,200 feet away, and he decides to aim at the crane. You can see the crane up here. It would be pretty hard to see on your phone, okay? But he keeps aiming, so he knows where he's going on the site. So he's flying, and he decided to look up to check where the drone kind of was at the last minute. He probably got like 8 or 10 feet away. So there's a lot of things you got to learn. But to go out and be able to look at sites just after they're completed, and also if you could survey and get, existing as-built, other things. Contractors right now are using this to look at what volumes they've used over time. So I know some of the gravel pits already are using this to check and use that for surveying. Now, you wouldn't want to do that like daily, but you may want to do that weekly or whatever because of the processing time it takes. Emergency management, they can actually go put night vision cameras on it. Right now, I think there's an exemption to the rules for public safety so that they can go out and use drones without a permit. This was getting in after like a tornado, that they were able to get into places where they couldn't get in otherwise. So different things, and I think in the future you'll eventually see now, UDOT's done a lot of things to where they're able to get real-time traffic monitoring now with their signals, but I think there's going to be things I think, Bill, are you out there? Bill was telling me he gets videos from like Mexico if they want to build a roundabout, and he knows what their traffic counts are, so there's different things going on. The problem now is with only 20 minutes, battery, it's not quite there yet, but there's some things going on that way. So I think, do you want to hit that light back on? So I think I've given you most of the details. The one thing that's really cool about this one, I mentioned the Russian satellites. So it used to be, you can only fly with 6 satellites. You need at least 6. When I'd go out sometimes I'd have maybe 8. You get up high in the air, maybe I'd get 10 with the old one. With this now I was getting like 16 to 18 satellites. I actually had 8 satellites sitting in my house, and I wanted to see if that was true, but I didn't. And then even when we went up in the mountains where the horizon's cut down by the mountains, we still had about 10 satellites. When we were up at the Washito conference in the summer, we actually went up and flew the river trip that people were on, and it was in a pretty steep canyon. We could barely get 6 satellites. With this now, we'd probably be getting 10. So that's why I think it's getting a lot safer, and I think they'll keep building in kind of other things that they can build in. The technology's there, just how much people want to spend. So that's kind of what I have in general, but I'll open it up to questions or other comments because some people have flown and different things. So questions?
What do you think about the concept of Amazon using them for delivery boxes, having that much volume, around the city?
I read about it, and they said initially they wanted to try it in more rural locations where it was difficult to get out and get their things to. I don't know. I think the thing is, here's the thing. The more you try and limit things, really you try and make all these rules, and really you got to deal with stupid people. So like stupid people are going to go out and do things anyway. So I think if you try and make the rules too strict that they're not common sense, then people will just go do other things. So I think it's going to start in other countries first because it's kind of so restrictive in the U.S. right now. My boss actually sits on the ASTM committee for this, and he said everyone on the ASTM committee are pilots. So the pilot's perspective on it is all these planes are going to get hit and go down. But yet there's a lot of other things that like engineers can see to do useful things with it. So I think you got to balance those. And I don't know, Amazon, who knows? So other questions?
Have you seen the new drone gun that they have?
I heard about the drone gun. That would be cool. There's also the shotgun version. Have you heard about the shotgun version? This was actually, it was on the radio one day. This guy was suing another guy because he shot his drone down with a shotgun. And the other guy said that the guy was trying to look at his daughter in the backyard. And so the debate was like, who was right? And the guy with the drone said, well, I have the telemetry and I can show you that I wasn't looking at your daughter because it's a wide angle lens, I really couldn't see anything. And the guy with the shotgun's like, if you were that far away, the pellets would have spread and I never would have brought you down. So it was a really interesting discussion, but I've seen that they're putting that together. From what I understand, the FAA already has the technology probably to be able to shut stuff down that's within the airport and stuff. So I think there's going to be other things that happen.
Yeah, I saw a video on it, and it allowed like a security guard to take control of the drone and land it, and hack it basically with this antenna.
So, well, I think there's, my boss said when he was out in South Ogden the other day, and he's like, I got up to 100 feet, and it wouldn't let me fly anymore, and it started, the app started going away, and he said it actually reset the 4G on his phone. so he had to restart his whole phone. And he thinks he was probably within 5 miles of Hillfield. So he's not sure if it was the app itself or anything that Hillfield had to do with it, but I think there's probably a lot more going on than we already have figured out. And everyone's figuring out other ways around it. Other questions? Okay, thanks for coming.